Hi there everybody! I wasn't planning on making another video before the Princess Elise one I teased about a month ago, but surprise! Yeah, I don't know what to say. I felt incredibly compelled to respond to a certain video made by Characters in Depth. I came across it by chance as I was researching for my own stuff, and I thought the idea for the video was really promising. I love videos that focus on lore details like this. In fact, if you know anything about my channel, you'll see that I'm going over how the concept of aura works in the Sonic series. Plus, this isn't the first video I've seen from this YouTuber. I like a lot of his individual character analysis videos, especially the Sonic, Robotnik, and Knuckles ones. I think they're pretty good, so I was excited for this video. I was eager to hear some good argumentation, some in-depth analysis as it were. And sadly, this video does not have any of that. It's quite frankly 7 minutes of him repeating "I want humans in Sonic games again" with disjointed reasonings that never explain objectively why specifically humans should reappear in future games. It is the closest thing to an empty video I've seen in a long time, and I don't think he realized just how little he was actually saying as he made it. I also believe that once I start systematically breaking down his arguments, even Characters in Depth will understand how empty this video really is. Trust me, I'll qualify those statements in just a moment, but before I do, I want to make it clear. Some people are going to take this video the wrong way. Some of you will interpret me picking apart this man's arguments as me picking on him as an individual. That's not what this video is about. It's a response, not an attack. I don't hate Characters in Depth, I just think this video he made is unbelievably bad. Also, and I need you to listen closely, I don't really care if humans are in the games or not. I don't. Bring them back, keep them away. I could go either way at this point. That's not what I'm arguing for in this video. I'm saying that the points in the video he thinks supports the human inclusion stance don't actually support that argument. It's about his argumentation and the points he presents being incredibly flawed and not applicable to the human inclusion position. I just want that on the record so that when people who are watching the video only to make assumptions about my character and my intentions, everyone will have a nice little timestamp that will instead prove who they are. Alright, let's tackle this debacle of a video.
Humans belong in Sonic games.
Okay, right out of the gate. I don't have a problem with that opening line. I think it's fine actually, so long as you qualify it in the rest of the video. But he doesn't do that, so really it's just a definitive statement that he will continue to repeat in different words until the video is over. Don't believe me? Let's keep going.
The world of Sonic is unique as a hybrid of fantasy and reality. The original installment proved this with the inclusion of the checkerboarded Green Hill Zone and the Dreamlike Special stages, as well as the Urban Starlight Zone and the Industrial Scrapbrain Zone. It's a different take on Earth.
I think that this would have been a better opening line for the video, simply because it doesn't have that repetition of the title and gets right into the meat of the argument. It's actually a nice setup, especially with him bringing up examples and evidence to back up his point. The world of Sonic is definitely a hybrid of fantasy and reality. The zones of Sonic 1 help illustrate that point effectively. But then he goes on to say,
the hero Sonic and the villain Dr. Eggman hinted the existence of both anthropomorphic animals and humans. Eggman's not the only human, he's one of many. It's not like he's Will Smith in I Am Legend.
Which is actually not supported by the evidence he's given. Robotnik existing doesn't mean that Sonic's world has more humans on it. You can't know that there are more humans in Sonic's world simply by looking at Sonic 1. There isn't any concrete evidence in Sonic 1 to support that. How do we know he's not like Will Smith in I Am Legend? How do we know he didn't travel to Sonic's world somehow? As a matter of fact, how do we know there are more anthropomorphic animals like Sonic on the planet? We only see Sonic in Sonic 1. All the other animals appear to be feral cartoon versions of real-life animals. We couldn't say definitively that there were more Sonic-type characters around the world until other games introduced more characters. If all we had was Sonic 1, we couldn't come to the definitive conclusion that there are civilizations of Mobians around the world. So how could you use the same game to definitively prove there are more humans around the world? He jumped to that conclusion to force the idea that, see, even way back in the first game, it was established that humans need to be in Sonic, when the only thing that was established about humans in that game was that there's one and he's the bad guy. Case in point, Groot from the MCU. He's a one-of-a-kind creature. There's no other life forms like him at all, despite his team traveling across the universe and visiting many different alien planets. Not one is similar to him in any way. And unlike Rocket, the story never acknowledges the fact that Groot is the only living tree in the story, similar to how Sonic 1 doesn't acknowledge Robotnik. So therefore, I can't just point to Groot and say, because he exists, there has to be an entire civilization of his species living in the same universe as him, because there's no evidence to support that in the text. A certain type of character existing doesn't mean you can conclude that there's an entire civilization off-screen of that species. That's not how evidence works. That's called making an unjustified leap in logic to affirm your opinion. It's like if you looked outside right after it rained and your neighbor said, "This means Atlantis has finally risen from the sea to take over the surface world." And then you'd be like, "Greg, what the heck are you talking about? Just because it's wet outside doesn't mean Atlantis exists or that we're being attacked by them." And then your neighbor goes, "Well, it's wet outside and I think it'd be cool if Atlantis existed. Therefore, it must be an attack from Atlantis. It's so obvious. There's no other explanation." And then you remember why you don't talk to Greg anymore and proceed with the rest of your day. My point is, Characters in Depth doesn't have enough evidence to support the conclusion that there's a civilization of humans coexisting with anthropomorphic animals in the Genesis era. And he's going to continue to state this emphatically without properly supporting it by using evidence. And that's terrible argumentation.
There are various regions in these games with their own cultures and cities, some of which modeled after real-life places. Casino Night Zone in Sonic 2 resembles Las Vegas, and Central City in Sonic Adventure 2 is San Francisco all the way, from the Golden Gate Bridge to the parking attendant vehicles.
Once again, I agree that Sonic's world is a blend of fantasy and reality. I agree that real-world locations were heavily referenced in the design of levels and elements in the game. But just because there are real-world elements in the locations doesn't mean you've magically supported the argument that humans belong in Sonic games. Those 2 points don't connect. Sorry, man. They just don't. There's a lot of movies, games, and cartoons that have locations based off of the real world, but there's no humans in them at all. Just look at Zootopia, Beastars, Disney's Robin Hood, Agretzko. All series that are entirely based off of real-world locations but don't feature a single human being in any of them. So no, the mere existence of Station Square and Radical Highway doesn't mean humans have to be included. Also, how does Casino Night Zone resemble Las Vegas? What part of Las Vegas specifically looks like what part of Casino Night Zone specifically? If you mean to say that it's based off of Las Vegas because casinos and palm trees, then I'm sorry to say that it's not enough to qualify that statement. If there was a specific element that he pointed to in Casino Night Zone that matched a location in Las Vegas, then I wouldn't have a problem with this statement. But as it stands, he just says it and keeps moving, never once qualifying it. Get used to that, we're gonna see a lot of it as the video continues.
Speaking of which, the Sonic Adventure games added more to the world building thanks to friendly citizens and high-ranking authorities that play a vital role in the narrative. The people of Station Square in SA1 make the city feel alive with their charm and personality. In SA2, everyone around the globe reacting to Eggman threatening the planet with the Eclipse Cannon made the situation dire. The Guardian Units of Nations, or G.U.N, is a military established in SA2 that sets the characters into motion. Y'all remember that sick moment where Sonic jumps off the helicopter with a makeshift snowboard? You can thank G.U.N for getting him there.
I don't have a problem with this statement. It's clear that the world building took a giant leap with Adventure 1 and 2 in almost every regard. However, the added world building doesn't prove that these characters had to be humans. If the NPCs he mentioned were the exact same characters and the only difference was their physical appearance had changed to look like Mobians, then what would really change in the story? Would they be less friendly somehow? Would they have less charm somehow? Would their personalities suddenly change? Would any of their dialogue change? I went back and looked at each individual NPC's dialogue in Adventure 1, and let me tell you, none of it hinges on the fact that they're humans living with anthropomorphic animals. They treat the Mobian characters exactly like they would if they were humans. In Adventure 2, if all the people who watched the Eclipse cannon blast the moon were anthropomorphic animals, would the situation be any less dire? Would the celebratory tone at the end completely change if the happy cheering people were Mobians? The answer is no. Nothing would change, not in the slightest, because the species of these characters aren't important. Their position in the story is. Innocent bystanders, normal people, that's what's important. Individuals that can't defend themselves, so Sonic and Co. have to save them, or Robotnik and Co. can terrorize them. That's the whole point of having these background characters. There's nothing intrinsically better about having human background characters as opposed to Mobian background characters, so it doesn't support the human inclusion argument in the slightest. Finally, let's talk about G.U.N. He's gonna have more to say about them in a moment, but I just need to make something clear. G.U.N is really great as humans for very specific reasons. Explaining how they got Sonic and Shadow mixed up is just one contrivance that can be explained by them being humans. G.U.N being the ones that killed Maria is brilliant, which proves the self-destructive nature of humanity and lends credence to Gerald Robotnik's revenge plot. G.U.N is a highly effective, oppressive force in the Sonic series, and I think the stark contrast of humans against Mobians is very striking and thematically relevant. Comparing them with Robotnik and his methods of oppression is an incredible tool to help with storytelling. And all of that is just about their appearance in Adventure 2. I didn't even mention Shadow's game, or Sonic Battle, or Sonic Chronicles even. You want to know how many of the points I just made he's going to address? Let's find out.
The Guardian Units of Nations, or G.U.N, is a military established in SA2 that sets the characters into motion. Y'all remember that sick moment where Sonic jumps off the helicopter with a makeshift snowboard? You can thank G.U.N for getting him there. And given that Eggman and Chaos have done so much damage in earlier games, it makes sense for humanity to have an army to return fire.
Oh, what a surprise! None of them. Just, remember that cool helicopter scene? Thank G.U.N for that, yay! And Eggman and Chaos did a bad. Humans fight against them is a good. Neither of which supports the human inclusion idea. If G.U.N was still the antagonistic force that began Sonic's story and opposed Robotnik's plans in the Dark story, how would it be any different if they were Mobians and not humans? The answer is it doesn't change anything, so there is nothing about the added world building that supports the human inclusion argument. Nothing. And let me be clear, I like that G.U.N exists as the world's response to Robotnik in his attempts to rule the world. But I didn't use that as an argument to prove that G.U.N being humans is necessary to the series. That's the difference. I separated my reasons why G.U.N is an effective part of the story. One portion of my reasons are focused on G.U.N as a whole. Another portion of my reasons are focused on G.U.N being humans. Because not all of the reasons I have are effective evidence for the particular position being presented. For example, I like the design of the goggles for the G.U.N soldiers in Shadow's game. Does that have anything to do with them being human? No. So should I use it as evidence that G.U.N needs to be humans? No. But that's what Characters in Depth is doing in this video. We're a fifth of the way through, and he hasn't said a single thing to support his argument. Not a single thing. Imagine watching a 90-minute movie where the first 18 minutes is just a GIF loop of the title. That's how this video feels.
Aside from world building, humans have another solid purpose: strengthening the characters. Tails protecting Station Square from Eggman made him a brave hero. The well-meaning Maria gave Shadow a conscience. Eggman was inspired by his grandfather, Professor Gerald Robotnik, to become a renowned scientist. Or try to be one. Through Force, it brings us to this rare moment where he has a heartfelt talk with Tails.
As a child, I looked up to my grandfather because of all the great things he accomplished in his life. He was my hero, and I wanted to be a great scientist like him.
Alright, he's really doing some reaching on this one. Tails' character depends on the innocent bystanders being human? Really now? If Tails was protecting a bunch of innocent Mobians, would he somehow be less of a hero? Would that take away the bravery he displayed, the tension of the scene, the triumph of his battle? No, of course not, because the point of the innocent bystanders in that scene was simply to give Tails individuals to protect. Human or Mobian doesn't matter to Tails' character in that scene. Once again, you point out what the humans did was important, not that it was important that they were humans. So their species could be anything, and it wouldn't change the story, the characters, or the world at all. So again, this doesn't prove that humans belong in Sonic games. The only example where the species of a character was important to the strengthening of the characters is in the case of Gerald and Maria Robotnik, because they're tied to Dr. Robotnik. By default, they had to be humans. Still, having Maria as a human helps with Shadow and Gerald's view on humanity. She embodies the depth of good that humanity is capable of, while Gun is the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Having her bond with Shadow is vital to his character. So, I'll give you that one, characters in depth. That's a good example of humans being important to the story. Good job. Wish the rest of the video was like this.
The inclusion of humans often tends to attract darker storytelling, but when it's done right, that touch of the darkness can bring out the best of the heroes. It isn't always done right though. The gun commander in Chao the Hedgehog is overblown with his violent temper, and doesn't even consider the logical choice in not sending his troops after Shadow when he fights the invading Black Arms.
Unconfirmed sources have also reported seeing a black hedgehog in Westopolis.
Shadow? Deploy the troops now! And if you find Shadow with the black aliens, then kill them all.
But sir, isn't Shadow on our
I
side?
gave you an order, soldier. He's evil and he's the enemy.
Are you high or just incredibly stupid?
This isn't how you write drama for a character. Get it wrong, and they come across as rabid.
It's not just Maria. Even my family died because of you.
But you told me Maria was your only family.
Shut up! My bullet! You killed my bullet! Curse you, Wall! You haven't seen the last of me! Curse you!
The notion that the inclusion of humans often tends to attract darker storytelling, as if to imply that there's no possible way Sonic can have a dark story without them, is really narrow-minded. Sonic Battle didn't feature any humans, and it has one of the most impactful and darkest stories of the entire series. Emerald is raised by the cast, with them literally calling him a baby and a child several times. But it ends with him being corrupted into an omnicidal maniac that Sonic has to beat to death in order to save the world. His final words are heartbreaking, and we have to see the characters bitterly mourn the death of the child they raised. Although there are several off-screen ancillary characters that one could imply are human, once again, that's the point I'm trying to make. It didn't matter what their species was. The story, the characters, the world building doesn't change if their species is human or Mobian. Sonic Rivals 2 features a literal hell dimension and attempted blood sacrifice of the Chao, baby animals, to a massive demon. Not to mention Eggman Nega himself is one of the darkest villains in the entire series, who has witnessed the mind-shattering existential reality of the multiverse he exists in. Sonic Lost World shows Amy and Knuckles dying right before Sonic's eyes, then cutting to black and never showing them until the very last scene of the game. Robotnik's dialogue at times is incredibly dark and sinister.
I'll get fat from eating your black hearts, you Eggman wannabes! I will burn your world, you rebellious scum! I will destroy everything you love and make you rot! No!
Boss, your hands!
As long as I can still strangle a Zeti, my hands are fine. I think I know a way to cause the lost hex to implode using null gravity effects. We could destroy the Zeti in one quick stroke.
And exterminate every living thing around them. Are you out of your mind?
Of course, there'd be some collateral damage, but
1 second you're contemplating genocide, and the next you're saving one of your worst enemies.
I'm a complicated guy. Tails acted for the greater good. Let's make sure his sacrifice isn't for nothing.
I'm supposed to be the fastest, but I was too slow to save my buddy.
And even his apparent death is incredibly tragic and impactful. The Deadly Six do everything in their power to roboticize Tails and mind control him into killing Sonic, much to Sonic's horror. Not to mention the various threats that certain Zeddies say can be interpreted as pretty dark.
You're going home in a box!
Maybe all the enemies and death traps will finish Sonic, maybe they won't. Does it really matter in the cosmic scheme of things? We're all gonna die eventually. Smiling hurts my face. When I hurt your face, it'll make me smile. So in the end, I'll just be hurting myself. Cool. Only the Reaper wins in the end. In this pain, I finally find comfort. Death's cold embrace.
Some of these instances people don't consider because the game backtracks on these moments, but having them in the game still contributes to the tone of the story. I know Tails isn't actually roboticized and isn't forced to fight Sonic, but the story tells us that the Deadly Six have done all they can to make that a reality. I know Amy, Knuckles, and Robotnik don't actually die, but the story committing to these death scenes so seriously shows us that this is not light and silly. It's dark, it's tragic, it's sad, and for a moment, the story is dark, tragic, and sad. Does the game bounce between this tone and a light, silly, fun tone to the point where it's neck-breakingly jarring and confusing? Yes, but the dark elements are still there, and that's all I'm arguing for right now. I'm glad Characters in Depth admits that the dark tone in the games featuring humans isn't always done right, and requires more than just humans being present to work. He says that you need to write the characters properly, and I 100% agree with that. Having dark things in your story doesn't make your story well written. Just look at Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. Every Twilight movie ever. Game of Thrones Season 8. All of these had dark elements, but the writing behind them was incompetent, so they were still terrible. I also liked his joke with the South Park clip and the Roger Vanderweed animation. That was good. The Roger clip ran a bit long, but I liked it overall. Good job. That's 2 times you've made a good point. Neither was supporting your argument, but you made good points in general. Keep going, Characters in Depth.
I understand this world needing a military, but its leader must be composed. This guy's a bad example, but Sonic 06 is the worst. The humans in that game are far too intrusive, and some will actively impede your journey unless you clear a town mission. The game is long enough as it is. This only pads it out even more. SA-1 never did this.
And now I have to take back my compliment. Sorry, you dropped the ball again, dude. Notice what he's doing here. He's poking holes in his own argument. He's already brought out that having a dark tone doesn't make the story good. Again, that has nothing to do with Sonic games needing humans in them, but sure, I agree with that statement. If he would have left it there, I wouldn't be taking my compliment back. I'm taking my compliment back because, strangely, he backtracks even more and attacks his own bad points without realizing it. When he brings up the NPCs in Sonic 06 being intrusive and basically just padding, he's admitting that there are human characters without a dark tone that aren't good for the story. So the position he held earlier in the video of humans being good for the world building is now being countered by the Sonic 06 NPCs. He claimed that the SA-1 NPCs and the gun antagonists in SA-2 were great additions to the world building because
friendly citizens and high-ranking authorities that play a vital role in the narrative.
But the human NPCs in Sonic 06 also fall under those same descriptions. There are a lot of friendly citizens in the hub worlds. There's even a Sonic Man who shows his adoration for Sonic by imitating him. And there's a ton of people who let the main characters know whatever they need to so that the players can know where to go next. And they're just some generally pleasant characters living in this town. There are also a lot of high-ranking authorities that play vital roles in the narrative. Lord Regis is one such character. He even worked alongside the Duke of Soliana on the Solaris project. You don't get much more vital than that as far as the narrative of 06 is concerned. But if that wasn't enough, you've got a slew of royal guards that let you know where certain locations are and how to get passage to those locations. There are also oracles who literally call you an eagle to take you to the next level of the game. That's pretty vital if you ask me. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that there is fundamentally nothing different between the two groups of human NPCs. In fact, O6's humans are more vital and more friendly than SA1's humans. So according to the qualifications that Characters in Depth presented, he should be praising the O6 humans more than the SA1 humans. But he's not. Why? Because Sonic 06's humans were intrusive and padded out the game. But how does that correlate to their characters being bad? What do the town missions have to do with the character writing of the humans? What does the game being padded have to do with the personalities of the humans? What does Sonic 06 being a bad game have to do with the human inclusion argument? The answer is nothing! It doesn't have anything to do with the focus of the video. However, he's using that as a reason why the 06 humans are the worst, despite them exceeding the criteria that he measured the SA1 humans with. This is where I realized he doesn't actually care about the human inclusion or the human exclusion arguments. This video isn't actually about that. It's about NPCs. The title of the video shouldn't be Humans Belong in Sonic Games. It should be Non-Intrusive NPCs Belong in Sonic Games. Which is something I fully agree with, but the argumentation for it is confusing and abysmal. Again, I ask you, would the story, the character development, the world building of 06 be any different if the NPCs were Mobians and not humans? No. Would Characters in Depth like the NPCs if they were non-intrusive but retained their personalities and positions in the story? Yes, obviously. Would he like the NPCs if they were non-intrusive but were Mobians and not humans? According to the evidence in this video, he should. So, Characters in Depth, what I'm saying is, you don't fully believe your own argument by your own admission in this video. That means the point you're trying to make isn't a good point. That means cut it out of the video or rework the rest of the script to have this make sense, man.
Thankfully, Sonic Unleashed did a fantastic job with humans. These have got to be the most polished and colorful designs of humans in the franchise. Similar to Station Square, they're kind, never get in your way, and play a major role in raising the stakes. We care about them, so we want to help them. This contributed in making the final battle against Dark Gaia feel intense.
Well, I agree with all that. The human characters in Unleashed are better written than most, if not all the other NPCs in the other games. They're well designed, they are kind, they help raise the stakes, but what does any of that have to do with their species? If they were Mobians but behaved the exact same and did the exact same things, how would anything be different? The answer is nothing would be different. It would be the exact same game, just with character models swapped out. He never says anything about why their human nature is important. So none of that supported your argument. It just makes me wonder why you bothered bringing it up. Now, if this video was about NPCs, then this would support something and he'd be making some headway. But as it stands currently, it's meaningless commentary that amounts to him saying, "I like humans," over and over again. There's no real substance here.
Sadly, Sonic Unleashed was the last time we'd see humans besides Eggman. That's a shame, since the games released afterwards feel hollow without them. I'm not saying they have to be in every installment, but when they have potential for good storytelling, then they should be brought in. In Sonic Colors, Eggman builds a giant amusement park in outer space, and it's empty. If there were a lot of people in it, then the impending explosion near the end would have provided some urgency. But that doesn't happen.
I agree with that. If a story is focused on or is heavily dependent on the human species, then by all means, bring those humans in the story. But here's the issue. When he presents an example, it has nothing to do with the human species. For the 20th time now, if Robotnik's amusement park was filled with helpless Mobians, what would change about his scenario? Nothing. Absolutely nothing would change. Because it doesn't matter if the innocent bystanders are people or animals. The important part is that they are innocent bystanders. That's the real reason why Sonic Colors feels hollow. If there was a massive crowd of Mobians in every scene, then it wouldn't feel so hollow. At least how Characters in Depth has used hollow in this context. You want background characters, dude. You're not specifically arguing for the human species, you're arguing for more background characters.
In June 2017, the head of Sonic Team, Takashi Iizuka, retconned that there are two separate worlds in the canon, a world of anthropomorphic animals and a world of humans. Supposedly, Sonic used to hop into the human world, and now he spends all his time in the anthro world. I don't buy it. If you want to believe this retcon, then you'd have to ignore that SA1 has the ancient Echidna tribe and Station Square in the same world. Green Hill Zone is one boat ride away from Central City in Sonic Adventure 2. The adventure titles aren't Game Gear installments that can easily be brushed off as non-canon.
Okay, so first off, Sonic Chaos is canon. Who put the idea in your head that it wasn't? Because this is the first I'm hearing that it's not canon. Even if it isn't canon, how do you know that for sure? In other words, cite thine sources, heathen. Second off, let's talk about the two worlds concept that the brilliant Iizuka totally didn't make up on the spot without thinking it through. I think pretty much everything Characters in Depth said about it in this video is correct. I don't think this retcon makes sense, I don't think it is the correct response to fan backlash, and I think it raises more questions than it answers, which is the opposite of what a retcon is supposed to do. It's retroactive continuity. It's supposed to answer specific questions and bring clarity, not confuse us even more. That being said, I don't think it's a bad decision. In fact, I think it's the best answer to the plethora of lore and world-building inconsistencies and questions that the series just doesn't answer. I think that right now there's not nearly enough thought put into it to satisfy anyone or make sense of anything, but I think the idea can and should work with more details. For those of you who don't know, I've covered how the multiverse concept is used in the Sonic series and how it fixes some glaring issues in continuity with very minimal effort. If Sega was to rework the two worlds concept into a multiverse concept, then I'm sure a lot of people would dig it. For example, a huge problem that most fans picked up on is Blaze's continuity. She appeared as two different characters in two different games back to back. Iizuka the idiot said that Blaze was the same Blaze from Sonic Rush, she just forgot about the events that happened in Sonic Rush. And everybody else forgot what happened in Sonic Rush. Not that Sonic Rush isn't canon, but everyone collectively got amnesia, but only in reference to Blaze.
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
This makes zero sense, of course. I mean, this is Iizuka the idiot we're talking about here. This is the same man who said that the reason the moon isn't damaged in every game following Adventure 2 is because the moon rotated in such a way that every time we happen to see it, it's the side that didn't get blown up. He really is an idiot. I don't know how to make that any clearer. However, multiverse theory can account for the amnesia thing, and Blaze having a vastly different character and background. The multiverse concept, for those who don't know, is the idea that there are multiple worlds or realities or timelines parallel to each other and similar in most ways except a few key differences. I propose that the act of time travel creates these alternate realities or timelines, which is similar to the way time travel works in Dragon Ball Z as seen in the Cell Saga. My proof of this is Sonic 06, wherein events change in Sonic's time, but Silver's time remains unchanged no matter what. Not just that the future is in the same state, but that the exact same events that led to the exact future that Silver is from still happen, despite the direct changes Silver makes to the past. There's also the Silver from the Rivals games, who meets Sonic & Co. for the first time in those games and has a similar future. But instead of Iblis destroying the world, it's the Ifrit. And instead of Blaze being from his world, it's Eggman Nega who's from his world. Eggman Nega, who is his arch nemesis in the Rivals games, but in 06 is nowhere to be found or even mentioned in the entire game. Also, Blaze recognizes Crisis City in Generations, which she shouldn't be able to do, considering she not only disappeared into another dimension, I might add, but Crisis City was supposed to be erased due to Elise blowing out the Flame of Hope. So even if you could explain away the fact that Crisis City exists in Generations, you can't explain why Blaze remembers it, nor why Silver doesn't recognize Blaze in Generations, if he's the same Silver from 06 and she's the same Blaze from 06. But herein lies my definitive proof of the multiverse concept in Sonic. The fact that all of these discrepancies can only be explained through the concept, but also the games themselves directly giving proof to it. Classic Sonic's world and Blaze's world are described as different dimensions existing parallel to modern Sonic's world, and there are literally two different versions of Sonic, Tails, and Robotnik that appear side by side. And for the final piece of irrefutable evidence that supports the multiverse concept, I present this quote from Robotnik in 06. All existing timelines. All timelines. Plural, multiple. All of this is clear proof that the Sonic series works on the multiverse concept. It's not a headcanon, it's not a theory, it's not a wild guess. Multiverse is a thing in the Sonic series. It is an objective fact that can and has been proven.
Everybody got that? Good!
Now that we got that out of the way, let me give you an example as to how this works. As I said before, in 06, despite the various changes made to the past, the future remains unchanged, even at the end of Silver's story. Iblis has still ruined the world, and everything that leads to Iblis's freedom still happens. Therefore, there must be at least two timelines that the characters are time traveling from. One where Sonic's present results in Silver's future, and one where Silver changing Sonic's present results in a different future that Silver doesn't get to see. Every time someone time travels, they split the timeline into two. One timeline where they travel forward in time, and another timeline where they just disappear and that timeline continues on without their influence. Meaning, there are multiple doppelgangers of each character with very similar histories, personalities, and experiences, but with key differences. So, Sonic travels to the future and that splits the timeline into timelines 1 and 2. Sonic goes to timeline 2's future while timeline 1 remains the exact same, only there's no Sonic there, so as time moves forward, events will be different without Sonic. When Sonic time travels back to the present, he creates another split, which makes timeline 3, where he ends up. Timeline 3's history is identical to timeline 1 and 2's. The differences only start at the point in time where Sonic arrives, which changes their futures. The changes could be so minute that you can't tell the difference between them, or so major that one of the timelines doesn't have any similarities with the others. So timeline 1's future could be Silver's future, and timeline 2's future could be near identical to timeline 1's, so you'd have two incredibly similar dystopian futures with a Silver residing in each of them. Everybody still with me? So let's say Sonic time travels to the past. What does that do? Well, obviously he already exists in the past, so when the timelines split at the point of time travel, then one of those timelines will have a duplicate of Sonic. So now we've got timeline 1, where Sonic 1 originated, and timeline 2, the home timeline of Sonic 2, where Sonic 1 has traveled to. Both of them are identical and have the exact same history until the point where Sonic 1 arrives in Sonic 2's timeline. Then the only difference between them would be Sonic 1 having knowledge from his experiences in the future, so he would be privy to information that Sonic 2 isn't. Now let's say Sonic 2 time travels to the future, splitting timeline 2 and making timeline 3. When Sonic 2 arrives in timeline 3, let's say Blaze is there. If she approaches him, he won't know her because he's from a timeline where he hadn't met her yet. So Blaze, who's in timeline 3 where she hasn't met Sonic, wouldn't know him either, despite the fact that Sonic 1 would know Blaze 1 and vice versa. Now, let's take this into the context of Sonic 06. There are 12 instances of time travel in the game, all going from past to present to future. So including the timeline we start with, that's 13 different timelines. Let's say that timeline 10 is the only timeline where Sonic Rush happens, so Blaze 10 knows Sonic in code 10. But in timeline 5, Sonic Rush doesn't happen, so Blaze 5 has no idea who Sonic and Co are. Let's say that Blaze 5 is the one we meet in Silver's future, timeline 6's future. Blaze 5 traveled from her present to timeline 6's future, met Silver 6, and went on adventures with him. So when she time travels to timeline 7's past and sees characters that Blaze 10 would know, she wouldn't react to them because Sonic Rush didn't happen in her timeline. And for the same reason, the Timeline 7 characters wouldn't know her because Sonic Rush hasn't happened there either. Does that make sense? The Sonic Rush Blaze travels back to her world, but Sonic 06 Blaze is a completely different character traveling to a completely different world. So of course neither 06 Blaze nor 06 Sonic & Co. would know each other from Sonic Rush, because none of them experienced Sonic Rush. Sonic Rush Blaze wouldn't see any Sonics and Tails again until Sonic Rush Adventure, but even then we couldn't be sure that it's the exact same Sonic and Tails she met previously, nor that the Blaze they meet in Rush Adventure is the same Blaze we saw in Sonic Rush. It could be a different Blaze that experienced a very similar Sonic Rush incident, and that's the one that's meeting the particular Sonic we play as in Rush Adventure. But the Sonic we're playing as, and the Sonic this Blaze has met previously are so similar, she wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them, meaning that they both can recognize each other and never realize that the version of the character they're with is not the exact same person they've met before. See what I mean? It's complicated and filled with nuanced details that need to be properly explained in order to have a shred of worth to the continuity of the series. Now compare all of what I've said about the multiverse concept to Iizuka the idiot just saying,
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
So yes, the two worlds concept as it stands is stupid. But no, I don't think we should cast it aside just because it didn't used to be like that or because Iizuka's an idiot. It can work better than any other retcon, but it needs to be extensively detailed in a game. Not just in interviews or supplementary material, it needs to be the focus of a game so that its canonicity can't be questioned and everyone can know how it works. Not just Megasonic nerds like me. But allow me to repeat what I've been saying for this entire video. What does this have to do with the human inclusion argument? Let's see if he qualifies this new point into credible support for his position. Who wants to guess if he pulls that off?
In June 2017, the head of Sonic Team, Takashi Iizuka, retconned that there are two separate worlds in the canon, a world of anthropomorphic animals and a world of humans. Supposedly, Sonic used to hop into the human world, and now he spends all his time in the anthro world. I don't buy it. If you want to believe this retcon, then you'd have to ignore that SA1 has the ancient Echidna tribe and Station Square in the same world. Green Hill Zone is one boat ride away from Central City in Sonic Adventure 2. It's always been one unified world, both humans and anthros living on the same planet.
Swing and a miss, shocker. He's getting hung up on the realistic locations again without ever acknowledging that 1, the geography of the world from game to game is nowhere near consistent, so trying to base an argument off of that is ridiculous. Who cares where Green Hill Zone is in one game? It could be on the whole other side of the world in the next game, and potentially not even exist in the game after that. The geographical continuity in this series is a mess, so how is Station Square and the Echidna tribe being in the same world relevant at that point? Did you forget that in the exact same game, the Altar of Emeralds is out in the open on a nondescript plot of land, when in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, it's under the catacombs of a freaking volcano, where you still have to navigate an intricate labyrinth of halls and use teleporters to actually get to the last corridor of Hidden Palace Zone? And even that location has the incredibly significant mural of Super Sonic fighting Robotnik for the Master Emerald, which is never shown in Adventure, even though we get to go back in time and see the civilization that created the mural in the first place. How about the fact that Green Hill Zone is on South Island in the middle of the ocean in Sonic 1, then in SA2 it's right along the harbor of Central City, and then in Sonic Battle it's somehow connected to Emerald Town, which is also connected to Central City, and then finally it's an entire friggin' continent in Sonic Forces. How about that? Did you forget about that? This doesn't help your argument, but the least you could have done is pointed out how inconsistent the locations are. And 2, there is no evidence that supports the claim that humans and Mobians have coexisted on the same planet until Adventure 1. When Tails Sky Patrol came out and Witchcard appeared, even that wasn't evidence that there was an entire civilization of humans living on the planet. Both Robotnik and Witchcart could easily be explained as anomalies, visitors from another world or a dimension that just showed up on Sonic's world one day. There is absolutely no evidence to support the fact that there's an entire civilization of humans coexisting with Mobians until Adventure 1, when we actually saw a human civilization. He keeps trying to force the fact that Robotnik existing means that humans occupy the same world as Sonic, and those two things don't correlate. You can't force them to correlate. The most you can do with that information is speculate. And once Sonic 2, Sonic CD, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and Sonic Chaos came out, the ability to reasonably speculate that humans existed en masse on Sonic's world became less plausible, each passing game reducing the possibility more and more. Think about it. Almost every game took place in a different location than the previous game. Sure, there were some overlaps and a lot of the locations looked similar to previous games' locations, but in every game, we got to explore other parts of this world. And by the time we got to Knuckles Chaotix, we had almost no reason to believe that a civilization of humans was out there. The inclusion of Witchcart didn't undo all of the other places we had already explored and found absolutely no trace of human civilization. I'm telling you, Robotnik existing wasn't enough. Witchcart existing wasn't enough. So to see someone so vehemently grasping at these straws and having them slip through their fingers is downright frustrating, because it's just such a flimsy argument. Do I need to point at all the other series that arbitrarily feature a token member of another species, and they don't ever show an entire civilization of said species existing with the primary species of the story? Superman from DC Comics. He's a Kryptonian that lives on Earth. Does that mean Earth has an entire civilization of Kryptonians coexisting with everyone else? No. Never has this been a thing in all the history of Superman comics. He has a miniature Kryptonian city called Kandor, but it's literally located in his Fortress of Solitude. That's the best we got. Hercules from Marvel Comics. He's an Olympian that exists on Earth. Does that mean Earth has an entire civilization of Olympians coexisting with everyone else? No, that's not a thing. Olympus is its own realm, described as a pocket dimension directly adjacent to Earth. The Villager from Animal Crossing. He/she coexists with all the other anthropomorphic animals, yes, but there isn't an entire civilization of humans in the Animal Crossing world. There's a couple here and there, but there's no civilization. They're just living in a world with a 99% anthropomorphic animal population. Adeliene from Kirby. She is the only canon human character in the series. This was actually done on purpose by Masahiro Sakurai, enforcing a mandate that no human characters were to appear in the series. Since Adeliene was established in 2 games before Sakurai was given full control of the franchise, he allowed that one human to stay, but he made it his mission to never include any more humans. All we get about her origins is that she's not from Popstar, which further illustrates my point. Jimmy from Jimmy Two Shoes. He is not only the only human character, he's one of 3 human-looking characters in the entire series. Everyone else are either Hellbeasts or mutilated Hellbeasts. Mutilated. Hellbeasts or mutated Hellbeasts. There is no mention of the existence of other humans. These characters are all anomalies on worlds dominated by a different species. Them merely existing doesn't therefore mean that an entire civilization of their species must coexist with other species on the same planet. That's just a baseless conclusion to jump to, and it's a clear sign of bad argumentation. So please, don't assert an assumption or opinion as a straight up fact when you don't have concrete evidence to back that up. That's bad. Don't do that.
This two worlds thing doesn't work for me. Here's what I think. The negative reception of Sonic 06 must have affected Iizuka's perspective of the franchise, so he exaggerates in making sure nothing can resemble that title, as a way of staying far away from it. No humans or realistic environments ever again.
1. There's no proof that there won't be realistic environments ever again. Just because Iizuka the idiot doesn't want to put more humans in the games doesn't mean that the environments are going to go away. Forces featured a realistic city level and it had no humans in it, so there's the proof right there. What are you talking about? Stop trying to use locations that are similar to the real world as connections to humans needing to be in Sonic games. Just stop. That's not an argument. It's nothing. Stop. Now, I think his guess about Iizuka the idiot not being able to understand the backlash that Sonic 06 got and overcorrecting to the point of kicking humans out of the new games is a safe bet. I get that. But again, if he had put some sort of quote from Iizuka or even someone else in Sonic Team that remotely backs that claim up, I wouldn't have an issue with it. But as it stands, once again, it's a flimsy statement. How do you explain Sonic Unleashed and its much more positive reception 2 years after 06 came out? Wouldn't that directly contradict Iizuka taking one look at Sonic 06's reception and cutting out humans for the rest of the series? Also, let's not forget that reviews are rarely just number scores without any sort of elaboration and specifics on why the reviewer gave that particular score. Sonic 06's reviews and reception wasn't focused on human characters being part of the game, it was how they were used. Specifically, Elise and all the problems with her relationship with Sonic.
What have I done?
Similarly, the reviews and reception for Unleashed wasn't focused on human characters being part of the game, it was the werehog and everything else. The only part of the reviews specific to the Unleashed humans say Unleashed hub world areas which have Sonic holding inane conversations with random pedestrians in tedious adventure-style quests. And another says you'll wander the streets talking to citizens for no good reason other than to bolster the amount of hours played. That's it. Nothing about how humans ruined the entire game, nor that humans were the worst part of the game. Nothing specific in the reviews or reception would lead an idiot like Iizuka to believe that customers will like a game less if there are humans in it. Or at the very least, it proves the reviews disprove that 06 has tainted all human characters that could have been featured in future games. Characters in Depth doesn't have anything he can point to that supports his claim, so my what about Unleashed point, which isn't the strongest point, mind you, knocks his flimsy argument out of the water. All he had to do was get a quote or show some form of proof that Iizuka or anyone at Sonic Team was taking into account the negative reception of Sonic 06 and letting that influence their decision making after Sonic Unleashed. Or at least address that the Unleashed humans were negatively received and that coupled with 06's reception influenced Iizuka's decisions. That's it. That's all he needed to do, and he didn't do it. And if you're saying to yourself, well, it's just his opinion, that's just what he thinks, does he have to have objective evidence and facts to support his opinion all the time? Then you're missing what I'm saying. I don't care how he feels about the subject we're discussing. He can love or hate the fact that Iizuka got rid of humans in the games. I don't care. Feel however you want. But once he said Iizuka's mindset is X because of Y, which is why he did Z, the opinion shield has been thrown out of the window. He's already brought in objective evidence to support his opinion, the negative reception of Sonic 06. There is an overwhelmingly negative reception to Sonic 06. This is a fact. He just used that fact to support his argument. That means this is no longer just his opinion. He's trying to argue a position he holds. So by saying, what about Unleashed, I'm not getting on him for thinking Iizuka wants humans to stay out of the series now. I'm getting on him for blatantly ignoring the more positive reception of another game featuring humans that came out after Sonic 06, which would destroy his reasoning for having his opinion. He can keep that opinion about Iizuka, but he'd be acknowledging that the evidence he tried to use to support his opinion didn't make sense objectively. I'm fine with that. My problem is not mentioning a contradictory piece of evidence that knocks your opinion flat just so you can assert that opinion as a fact. Which again, is bad. Don't do that.
Another problem with the Two Worlds retcon is that it abstains future installments from reaching their peak in storytelling.
Did you see that? Did you see that? He just did it again. Not having humans means the story can't be good. That's his opinion and he just said it like it was a fact. And this time he didn't throw up the in my opinion shield either. He just flat out said it like it was true. What on earth makes you think that Characters in Depth Did you forget about Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic Battle, Sonic Advance 3, Sonic Rivals 1 and 2, Sonic Mania? These games didn't have humans. You gonna tell me their stories don't measure up to the games with humans in them? Really? Because that's a battle you'd lose, my friend. But setting that troubling statement aside, let me go ahead and ask a question I've been asking this entire time, but with a little rephrase. If the Mobian NPCs in Sonic Forces were human NPCs, would that somehow make the game better? Would that fix how broken the Phantom Ruby is? Would that fix how unnecessary and forced classic Sonic is? Would that fix Tails regressing so severely it actually creates plot holes? Would that fix how useless and inconsistent almost every character in this game is? Would that fix the Mary/Gary Sue avatar character and how poorly it's implemented in the game? Do human NPCs fix any of that? No. How the hell would a model swap fix any part of Sonic Forces when all of the issues pertain to character inconsistency, continuity errors, and basic logical dissonance? This is a retarded argument. Let's just move on.
Another problem with the Two Worlds retcon is that it abstains future installments from reaching their peak in storytelling. Case in point, Sonic Forces. Eggman has won. He conquered the world, his empire has consumed everything, and only Sonic's resistance can stop him. Since this is set in the Anthro world, G.U.N can't strike back, and people can't react to Eggman's takeover since it's not their problem. We grew a connection to civilizations in the previous games. Leaving them out of a story of this magnitude was such a waste.
Okay, so I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you have clips in your video that contradict the points you're trying to make. You claim that people can't react to Robotnik taking over the world while showing innocent bystanders reacting to Robotnik taking over the world. They're cowering behind Tails, right there. You showed this clip in your video. I didn't edit this in there. You just shot yourself in the foot, man. There are also clips in the video of them cheering Sonic on after he rescues them from Robotnik's attack in Sunset Heights. But even beyond that, the story of the game tells us that the Resistance is made up of ordinary people that have been outfitted with Wispons. So his dismissal of the Resistance is baffling because they embody what he wants to see from human NPCs. They're kind, non-intrusive, helpful, high-ranking officials that are vital to the story. The Resistance not only held down the fort as best they could while Sonic was captured, they kept Sonic's friends alive by sacrificing themselves. They go on missions to support the main characters. They're so non-intrusive, they're usually reduced to little text boxes while the player works through the levels. The high-ranking officials are our main cast, but the soldiers are vital in their support roles, seeing as they kept the Earth from being completely taken over for 6 months. Not too shabby for a group of normal people. So what I'm getting at is every single scene with these Resistance soldiers is showing us people reacting to Robotnik taking over the world. And G.U.N not being here is bad, but we still have an army made up of normal, non-superpowered characters striking back at Robotnik's army. I don't think he realizes this, but a lot of people died in the 6 months Sonic was held captive in the Death Egg. Ordinary people who just wanted to protect their homes and loved ones took up arms against Robotnik's horde, and they died. They sacrificed their lives fighting a battle they didn't have a chance of winning, all in order to give the main characters more time to figure out a way to beat Robotnik. Some of those cowering people behind Tails might have run away in that moment, but realized that Sonic died trying to save them. That sacrifice might have been enough to either inspire or guilt them into joining the Resistance and taking Sonic's place. And chances are, they died trying to make up for their inaction earlier. If you want evidence to back that up, the Avatar is this exact concept played out front and center. The Avatar ran away scared from Infinite, while the Resistance fought valiantly and laid down their lives to give it a chance to live. The Avatar, whether out of guilt, anger, or inspiration, came to the Resistance HQ and became a soldier desperate to make up for how it behaved before. I don't think many people realize that the Avatar is just another story out of the thousands that played out off-screen during those 6 months Sonic was presumed dead. Forces is the game that focuses the most on ordinary people in the entire series, because the Avatar, the main character of the whole game, is an ordinary person. The entire Resistance is 99% ordinary people that tried to pick up where Sonic left off. The entire story ends with the Resistance needing to rebuild their broken world, and there's no possible way that the main cast could do that without the thousands upon thousands of ordinary people willing to step up and help them. Out of all the NPCs, Human, Mobian, Chao, and whatever else, the Forces NPCs are, quite frankly, the best characters by a mile.
All hands, maintain altitude and assemble a tight formation. Sonic's team is our last hope. We have to protect them. Huge enemy force is closing fast. We're falling under attack. Keep an eye on them. Don't let them get near. Every second we can buy for Sonic counts. Ship 3 took a direct hit to the bridge. They're falling back. Ship 7 has been crippled by heavy fire. Evacuate the flagship. All hands, abandon ship. Sorry, Sonic. We've done all we can. Good luck out there.
You get plenty already. Leave the rest to us.
The characters in depth just said, nah, they don't count because they're not gone, and brushed them aside without a second thought. Yet, he hasn't made a single point that supports his human inclusion argument. In fact, he's made some points against it. And we're 4/5 of the way through this video. Can you understand why I was so compelled to respond to this video now? Can you see how stupendously empty it is now? Is it clear to you just how little he thought about this topic before making this video? Boy, I sure hope you get it by this point. His next point,
we grew a connection to civilizations in the previous games,
has nothing to do with humans. Once again, if those civilizations we cared about were retconned into Mobians, our connection to them wouldn't have changed. The problem wasn't that humans were left out, it was that the civilizations we connected to were left out. Those civilizations just so happen to be human civilizations, but their species isn't why they should be featured. They should have been featured because it would make so much more sense for the story. Let's look at another example of a civilization that was left out of Forces and would have benefited the story by including them. The Chao. Where are the Chao in all of this? Were they casualties in the war, or has the real chaos been protecting them this whole time on Angel Island? In fact, where's the real chaos in all of this? Is it really going to sit back and let the entire world burn without lifting a finger to help, despite it being known to appear in times of great crisis? Has Knuckles even tried getting it to fight on their side? How about the Babylonians? I know there's only the rogues left, so they don't count as a civilization, but still, where are they? Why weren't they included? Wouldn't the story benefit greatly by including them? Their Zeppelin could be used as another, more secure HQ for the Resistance. Their technology could be used to help make the Resistance army more effective in all their efforts. Not to mention Jet, Wave, and Storm are exceptional assets that could possibly turn the tide of the war. What about the Zeti? Where are they? Are they stuck on the Lost Hex watching all of this unfold? Are they enjoying the destruction, or are they mortified? Do they wish they could be in the thick of things and terrorize the world? Are they even alive after Lost World? If so, how does the real Zavok feel about that? Is he content? Is he angry? Is he depressed? Does he want vengeance for his fallen comrades? Could the Lost Hex be a secret base for Robotnik during all of this, just as a safety net for if he doesn't win against the Resistance? See all of those very logical, very simple questions that immediately evoke some interesting story potential? Yeah, that's what focusing on characters and storytelling looks like, not arbitrarily focusing on the species of one civilization. Now, does this mean I don't want humans to be included in Forces? Like I said, I don't care if they're included or not. Does that mean I want all of these other species included in Forces? Nope. In fact, I want as many characters that I love as far away from this flaming pile of soggy trash as possible. Which answers another question that I bet someone has already formulated in their mind. My point is, Forces not including humans is quite possibly the least of its failings. So continuously ignoring all of the more egregious flaws while magnifying this particular one to an exaggerated degree in an effort to support the human inclusion argument is such a poor method of argumentation that I don't know where to begin. Not only that, but blatantly ignoring the absolute magnificence of the criminally underrated resistance soldiers simply because they aren't G.U.N is, by his own metric, bafflingly narrow-minded and contradictory. Make no mistake, I despise forces intensely, but even if I liked forces, what does that have to do with the subject of his video and the poor arguments he presents? What does it have to do with the subject of my response and the counter-arguments I'm presenting? Whether or not I like something has nothing to do with the methods I use to argue a point in relation to that subject. For example, Sonic Battle is one of my favorite games in the entire series, but if someone was to argue that Amy Rose is perfectly written in that game, I would tear that argument to shreds and subsequently criticize the game until I reveal every possible aspect of it that supports the position that she's terribly written. Does that mean I will then dislike Sonic Battle? Not at all. In fact, I'd probably end up liking it more, simply because I'd understand it more intimately than before. Conversely, Sonic Colors is one of my most hated Sonic games. But if someone was to argue that the wisps are useless to the gameplay, I would rip that argument apart and point out every reason I possibly can to prove that the wisps are vital to the gameplay of Sonic Colors. Does that mean I will then like Sonic Colors?
No.
I would probably end up hating it more than I already do because over time, I've forgotten how bad that game is. So analyzing it would just bring all that awfulness rushing back. My point is, when people are arguing or debating for or against something, personal feelings about the subject rarely have anything to do with the discussion. If I loved forces, my arguments would be the same. If I felt indifferent about forces, my arguments would be the same. So don't think because I'm arguing against someone that doesn't like X, that must mean I like X. That logic doesn't follow. I just want to make that clear real quick.
After playing something as unsatisfying as forces, we need humans back.
Well, that confirms what I said earlier. He just keeps saying the same thing in different ways without ever qualifying it.
Humans belong in Sonic games. Eggman's not the only human, he's one of many. It's not like he's Will Smith in I Am Legend. It's always been one unified world, both humans and anthros living on the same planet. Aside from world building, humans have another solid purpose: strengthening the characters. The games released afterwards feel hollow without them. People can't react to Eggman's takeover since it's not their problem. After playing something as unsatisfying as forces, we need humans back.
You add a drum beat to that and you got the makings of an above average 6ix9ine demo. But anyway, continue, guy.
And I'm not saying Sonic needs to get back into the human world. I want every game that was released this decade to be removed from the canon. The timeline is like a train wreck that gets worse with every new title. Split worlds, continuity errors, just drop all this stuff. The recent lineup of stories feel lackadaisical and shallow without humans to give them a boost. Certain characters have strong ties to humans, and it doesn't help that Sonic is far less heroic since he almost never rescues or expresses concern for a crowd of people like he did before. If we have nothing to fight for, then why should we care?
That was some interesting statements back to back with zero qualifications. Shall we just go down the line?
I want every game that was released this decade to be removed from the canon.
Sounds like a defeatist mindset, don't you think? Did he not take into account that people like these games, that they actually have a lot of good aspects to them, and that this decade doesn't include Sonic 06? Which is probably what he really wanted to say. I want Sonic 06 and every game after it to be removed from the canon, except the ones I liked. That sounds more like what he wants, considering his inconsistent take on the 06 NPCs compared to the adventure NPCs.
The timeline is like a train wreck that gets worse with every new title.
That's one, hyperbolic. Not every new title this decade has featured split worlds or egregious continuity errors. Sonic Colors was made before Generations came in and made classic Sonic a separate entity from modern Sonic, so no split worlds and colors. I'm not sure what he meant by continuity errors. I'm assuming he's not talking about character writing, but like lore and world building errors. I didn't notice any world building errors, just new, horrible gimmicks that refuse to die, and the beginning of retarded quote-unquote jokes that also refuse to die. Sonic Freeriders came out just before Sonic Colors, and it doesn't have anything to do with split worlds or has any continuity errors. Everyone is just written awfully, and the story makes zero sense, but the continuity is intact, and there are no alternate timelines or universes or dimensions anywhere. So that's two right there that don't have split worlds or egregious continuity errors. Most of the other games only have one or the other. Lost World has continuity errors, but I don't think it displays its split world thing at all. Mania has the split worlds, but it doesn't have any continuity errors. In fact, it's one of the few Sonic games to not have any continuity errors. So Generations, Sonic 4 Episodes 1 and 2, Forces, and Racing have both split worlds and egregious continuity errors. Granted, that's far more in the bad column than in the good, but every new title was hyperbolic and a little disingenuous. I get the point he's trying to make. There's much too much continuity confusion as of this decade, but he could have been more specific and more honest about making that point. And 2, the multiverse concept explains all of these errors. Sega needs to sit down and make a game that irons out every single detail of how the multiverse concept works in the series. That way, all continuity errors and inconsistencies can be explained and forgiven. Do I think they're gonna actually do this? Pfft, no. Sega is full of lobotomized monkeys. Of course they won't do what they obviously need to do to fix this series. Do I think the only other option is to erase an entire decade's worth of games from the canon? Absolutely not. Again, that's a defeatist attitude. Throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like I said, you'd be throwing out Sonic Mania, Sonic Generations, and Sonic Colors. 3 of the most popular and well-loved games of the entire franchise. You can't just throw out those gems and the plethora of minor good aspects to the terrible games. Sonic Lost World gave us some character development for Robotnik and Sonic, introduced Zavok, a fan-favorite villain, and brought in the parkour aspects of Sonic's abilities. Sonic Forces brought back respect for Knuckles and made him intelligent and useful again, made Robotnik a competent villain, introduced Infinite, a fan-favorite villain, and introduced a wide variety of now canon Mobian character designs, species, and accessories to the game continuity. Not to mention the stellar NPCs and the superficially cool bits like Sonic beating the crap out of Zavok, Shadow getting trapped and tormented in an illusion world, and Infinite making a sun. You don't just throw those away without a second thought. Why not channel your inner modern Hollywood and remake the terrible games and make them good? Apparently it's what's in nowadays. Plus, whatever changes you make to it will probably end up making it a better product than its previous incarnation. Don't overreact and go for the nuclear option when you can actually make something better than it was before. Just saying.
The recent lineup of stories feel lackadaisical and shallow without humans to give them a boost.
That's just him saying the same thing he's been saying, just with different words and no qualification. Up to this point, I've systematically countered these types of statements and provided evidence that supports my counter while going into as much detail as I can on why the statement itself is wrong. But I didn't need to do that, see? Because all I have to do is make the opposite statement, and both of our statements will negate each other and reset the argument back to before he opened his mouth and said the baseless assertment. So, ahem. The recent lineup of stories feel enthusiastic and deep without humans to suck the life out of them. There, total net zero. See how useless that type of argumentation is? It's like shouting into the void. It doesn't contribute anything to the discussion whatsoever. It reminds me of this.
Nuh-uh.
Good night, you two.
Night, Mom.
Certain characters have strong ties to humans.
I mean, yeah, that's true. I don't see how that means humans need to be featured in Sonic games more. I mean, Maria wasn't in 06, and Shadow still had an amazing continuation of his character arc in that game. So, what are we talking about here?
And it doesn't help that Sonic is far less heroic since he almost never rescues or expresses concern for a crowd of people like he did before.
I can agree with some of that, but like I said about Tails saving the innocent people in Station Square, whether or not the people he rescued were humans or Mobians, it would be the same result. If Sonic saved and expressed concern for a group of innocent Mobians, he would be just as heroic as he is when he saves and expresses concern for a group of innocent humans. And you conveniently left footage of Sonic saving Mobians and expressing concern for them out of your video. So not only are you making statements without qualifying them, but now you're intentionally leaving out evidence that contradicts your argument just to make your position seem correct? That's incredibly disingenuous, characters in depth. Sonic both saves and expresses concern for innocent people and forces, so by your own metric, he's being portrayed as heroic. Therefore, you should view Forces as a better game than you've said it is, but you won't because you don't like Forces. So instead, you use the species of the innocent people he's saving to dismiss clear evidence that debunks your argument. Do you not see the blatant disregard for evidence and his own metrics to force the message of the video? Please tell me you see this. Even if he hadn't intentionally left out evidence that counters his argument, once again, he hasn't proven why the species of these characters is important. He merely states something not intrinsically connected to their species, then adds humans belong in Sonic games afterwards. That's not a valid argument, not even remotely.
Sonic's world was special. That blend of fantasy and reality gave it a powerful identity, and that identity needs to be brought back to life.
Yeah, so I'm here once again to tell everyone that having realistic elements to the story doesn't mean humans have to be present in that story. Neither does it mean the world that story takes place in has lost its identity if humans aren't included. Once again, Beastars, Agretzko, Zootopia, and Disney's Robin Hood don't have a single human in them, yet they take place in realistic or grounded worlds that are very similar to ours. Are these series missing a powerful identity or suffering from a comatose identity because there's no humans in their worlds? The answer is no, because that's a stupid conclusion to draw. Yet again, I remind you that from 1991 to 1998, Robotnik and Witchcart were the only humans in the entire series. There was no hint, no shred, no reference to any other humans or any kind of human civilization across 28 games spanning 8 years. You mean to tell me that Sonic didn't have a powerful identity based on the blend of fantasy and reality before Adventure 1? You'd be wrong. If you mean to tell me that Sonic has lost its identity because someone took humans out of the games for 11 years, you'd be wrong again. This is a disconnected point he's trying to assert, and I'm just so tired of hearing it. Sonic has lost his identity and picked up a new one 10 times in this decade alone. Including humans in the games again isn't going to stop that. Bringing back the boost formula isn't going to stop that. Kicking out every character except the most famous ones isn't going to stop that. Throwing caution to the wind and coming up with some ass-backwards new mechanic isn't going to stop that. Sega doesn't know what they're doing. They don't have a clear vision of who Sonic is or what his franchise should be. They haven't known since Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I hate to say it, but it's true. Getting a powerful, consistent identity does not come down to a single decision. It'll come down to several major decisions enforced and maintained continuously by someone with half a brain and a buttload of integrity in that clown car of a company. It'll be a complex, arduous, and grueling task that we won't see the fruits of until years after the fact. I'm tired of hearing these vapid and shallow quick fix ideas from people who don't even have the wherewithal to provide easily obtainable research in a 7-minute video about their own goddamned opinion. Think before you pontificate how simple it would be to untangle the mass of Christmas lights that is this franchise. And on that lovely note, the video ends. What a disappointing slog that was. Goodness gracious. Alright, characters in depth, if you ever wind up seeing this, I'm going to address you directly now. This is, honestly, as accurately as I can sum up this creation of yours. For the entire duration of this 7-minute and 1-second debacle, you never, and I mean never, explain why the species of the NPCs should be human. You never expound on how humans could have added value to the games they're absent from, as opposed to Mobians. Every time you praise human background characters, you never explain why them being human makes them better or more exceptional compared to Mobians. This entire video, all you've done is make baseless statements point blank, propose a metric you use to measure quality, then ignore that metric when it doesn't suit you, repeatedly try to force points to converge and support your argument when they just don't, and make flat-out incorrect statements based on how you feel about the particular subject in question. And let's not forget the disingenuous act of leaving out evidence that counters your position, which amounts to lying through omission. None of that works as an argument. All it does is make you run around in circles repeating the same thing without ever explaining why you hold the position that you do. You have wasted your breath and your time on this thing, as well as everyone else's time who watches it. I don't know what happened on this one because your Sonic, Knuckles, and Robotnik videos are really great, stupendous even, but you clearly did your research on those and you were qualifying most of your statements. So that might explain why this one was such mind-numbing, pedantic garbage, but it certainly doesn't excuse it. Once more, because I'm sure someone is going to willfully forget that what I said in the beginning, I don't care about human characters. Bring them back, keep them out. I could go either way. It really doesn't matter to me. That's not what I take issue with in the video. I take issue with the fact that the entire video doesn't provide a single point that supports the human inclusion position. The name of this thing is Humans Belong in Sonic Games. Belong, as in they need to be in there. They have to be in there. They must be in there. That stance is never once supported here. Once again, because I know it's probably new for you to experience something like this, I don't dislike you. I don't know you, and generally when I don't know people, I tend to default and think they're decent. And I find myself agreeing with you on a great deal of things concerning Sonic and writing in general. But none of that, and I really need you to hear me on this one, none of that means your video is any less terrible. This video is abysmal, sir. Completely and utterly abysmal. Do better. I know you're capable of better. I've experienced and enjoyed much better from you. So please, for the love of all things pure and good in this world, never make a video this poorly put together ever again. Hopefully this can help you see where you can improve. Hopefully you can take some comfort in knowing that if I hated your guts, I wouldn't have bothered to take time out of my life to extend this critique. But there's a good chance you won't get this far in the video and you'll take everything I say personally. And hey, that's fine too. But let the record show that this video is objectively craptastic. Hey everyone, congratulations on making it to the end of this very unexpected, very divisive, very thorough response to Characters in Depth. If you're unfamiliar with this channel, I suggest checking it out. Just not this particular video I'm responding to. I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but it's terrible. For those of you wondering if I'm still making my Princess Elise rewrite or if this completely took over my life right after I launched the promo, don't worry. I've been redrafting the script, gathering research, and looking for the right place and time to record myself so I can start editing. It's going to be similar to my Eggman Nega video series. I dropped a promo and a couple months after that I started releasing the videos. So don't worry, I'm still very much hard at work. I just had to get this one out of the way real quick. For those of you that are new to the channel, how's it going? This is the part where I plug my Patreon. If you like this video, consider supporting the channel on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can get early access to videos, your name in the credits, and art pertaining to the videos. That's going to be important soon because I have to make some special art for the Elise video. Not that kind of art, you pervs. And for a couple bucks more, there's a lot of other exclusive content you'll have access to. So, that's all I got. Thanks for watching until the end, and I'll see you next video.